Hey everybody, I'm Greg, and this is Dani.
We had 365 days and $267,000 to build a house big enough for our growing family.
Today's adventure, groundwork and footers.
What could go wrong?
Man, that's a lot of snow. We are at a standstill until springtime. Our first compacting machine broke down. This is a wooden stake, right there. And this was a wooden stake. Over here, right about where you are, is another wooden stake. Yonder that way is another wooden stake. The reason that these stakes are in the ground, it represents the four corners of our new house. The first wooden stake I showed you is the lowest part of our land if you were to put a level across it. The second stake I showed you is the highest part of our land. The difference is about 18 inches. I entrusted my friend Dan to dig the trenches for the footers. In our area, they need to be 32 inches below grade to avoid frost damage. He is precise, and quite honestly, scares me a little bit when he drives this thing. The trenches came out flat and beautiful. Unfortunately, Dan got sick, so I borrowed my father-in-law's backhoe to get the ground level. I've never driven a tractor. I feel like the battery's dying. I don't know how to start this tractor, and I can't get a hold of the person who does. This stuff? I started by trying to take the high side down 18 inches and leveling the whole pad to the lowest point. Winter frost penetrates very deep into the soil, as you can see here. This causes a lot of ground swelling, and it is not an easy type of soil to dig. The soil was bad enough, I had to bring Dan back in.
Dan is very experienced behind the wheel. The sticks, controls, whatever, of large equipment, and his backhoe didn't mind the frozen earth at all. We set up a laser and Greg manned the story pole while Dan flattened the slab. He made short work of it, to say the least.
We lost 3 months to winter. The last day of digging with Dan, it started snowing and the ground froze immediately, and you guys saw some of the frozen ground. We didn't do anything. We couldn't do anything. The next step after what you just saw was to compact the ground here. The ground was too frozen. However, it warmed up considerably.
It broke.
And today it's very hot. Yesterday I got pretty burned, and now we got this thing compacted. It was a lot of work. Here it is. It's pretty beautiful. The next step, get this lumber that we purchased, these 2x8s, put them into a form that goes around the perimeter on the ground here, pour concrete into it. I'm gonna run through this real quick. I don't want to get too nerdy or boring. There are two lines, two yellow lines, one here, one here. This one on the inside represents the outer wall of the house. And this one represents the edge of the footer. The footer's 20 inches wide. This is 13 inches wide. Now that I found this, it has to be 3.5 inches away. We'll see how accurate I am. 3.5 inches. And then it'll be another one 3.5 inches off of that side. I just have to have this line, put my boards up along this line, and then 20 inches away, we'll do another board. I hope that makes sense. You can see I've done quite a bit of work in framing in, and that actually went pretty well. I liked doing that. I've never done it before, and it was pretty cool. I just realized after shooting the elevations with my laser level here, I screwed up. When Dan was here helping me clean out this ditch after all the cave-ins and the winter damage, he asked me, hey, do you want to shoot your laser level around the perimeter and make sure this thing is level? And I said no, because before winter, when we dug it out, we made sure it was level at that point. After I compacted this ditch and came back and framed all this in and it was all done, the northeast corner is about 7 inches higher than the southwest corner. Don't know how to explain why that's a problem. For those of you who do this a lot, you know that is a problem. I have a feeling that I'm gonna have to tear out my framing on the high side and we're gonna have to dig it out, drop it down to match this low side. It took way longer than I anticipated. I used my laser level to get the elevation right. I did not account for how long it would take me to get every little, you're nitpicking at leveling it, you're nitpicking at where to put the spikes, and I'm not even done. I need to put more ground stakes in and more braces. I'm gonna move on to the rebar section. Inside the frame and inside the footer, ultimately, we will have this rebar. Wherever one rebar meets another rebar, they have to overlap by 2 feet and then be tied together with wire. On the corners, for example, I either have to bend these to go around 2 foot, but what I'm actually gonna do is just make corners that have a 2 foot here and bend 2 foot there. The inspector just left and we passed for the footer inspection. I'm so happy. Anybody who's ever had an inspector come out to check all their hard work knows how stressful that can be. As you can see, I put a 2-inch PVC pipe running under the footer before concrete is poured. It would be very difficult afterwards. The reason is the incoming water for the house needs to be below the frost line. The footer is sitting just on the frost line. The water line, which will be a PEX tube, has to come through this from the outside. Yeah, you don't skip on your incoming water. So the inspector mentioned that we need to put a piece of rebar tied in to the rebar that's in the footer, sticking up wherever we want our electrical box mounted on the outside of the house. The piece of rebar needs to be on the inside of the house, but on the outside of this wall will be our electrical box. When I was younger, this was a copper stake that the electrician would hammer into the ground on the outside, and that would be the ground for the electrical system. I guess that's been replaced by either putting an extra piece of rebar tied into the foundation, or I could have used copper. I did some research, meaning I watched some YouTube videos. It's supposed to be tied to a 20-foot piece of rebar, or it is supposed to be a 20-foot piece of rebar, or you're supposed to have 20 feet of something connected to something. It's very confusing. I'm going to be a little bit cautious and overdo it. We spent the money on this bare copper 6-gauge wire. I saw this done. It was another state, another guy, another builder. We decided that anything that goes inside the concrete, we can't get to it again, so why not overkill? I'm going to connect this 25 foot of copper to the U for ground, into the trench, and get it tied in all the way. So we'll have 25 feet of copper and a piece of rebar that's tied to 20 feet of rebar. Leave some comments telling me how overkill this is, because I've never done this before. But basically I take these, and these are rebar clamps. I'm going to run this copper all along the rebar. I don't know, that's the U for ground, and apparently that protects us from dying of any horrible electrocution death.
Now that our footer's framed and the rebar is placed inside and wired up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna pour the concrete. Then Greg bent all of these rebar. After the pour is done, these rebar are gonna hook right under our horizontal rebar and be our vertical rebar. We're building an ICF house. Our ICF blocks are gonna go on top of our vertical rebar. This is an Amvic ICF block. After our footer's poured and we have our rebar sticking up from the ground, we're gonna put it up and over the rebar, and it's gonna sit on top of our footer. And this middle is gonna get filled with cement. The styrofoam is gonna act as insulation, and so will the cement, and the cement will be our structural barrier. This is just like Legos. The bottom has the same markings. So you just stack them all up on top of each other. And then the very last thing you do is pour cement to build.
That was quite the journey to get us to this point. The footer's done finally. And as you can see, we've moved on to the next steps. The stem wall is up, not filled with concrete yet because we have a lot left to do.
We have turned 13 days left. And our next project is going to be putting in the rough-in plumbing and filling the stem wall with concrete.
Please join us for the next video. Like and subscribe. How to get out of this pit? It's really easy for fat guys to fall into a hole. Can't really get out of them very well. Oh, now I gotta cross it. Okay, here we go. Cold hands. Hiya! Oh, that's the type of snow that sticks. It's not warm.